Hey guys, good morning. The Joe Madden Sports Podcast here, joined by Pete Jensen of the NHL Network, NHL Fantasy. You've got a podcast, Pete. Welcome back to the show.
Great to be on with you as always. And now we got a great Stanley Cup final matchup, right? Two of the true juggernauts in the NHL, Colorado Avalanche, Tampa Bay Lightning, a lot of star power, three-peat chances on the line for Tampa Bay. And Colorado's just finally trying to break through and win its first title since 2001. So excited to talk about it with you.
Yeah, it's crazy to think. It's been 21 years since 2001 when Colorado hoisted that cup. Be phenomenal for the team to be able to get it. But on the other side of the coin, Pete, how amazing would it be for Tampa Bay to do this 3 times in a row?
Right. No team in the NHL has done 3 in a row since the mid-'80s when the Islanders did it and then the Oilers did it right after them. So that's what's kind of bringing some parallels here. People are talking about, could this, if the Avalanche do win, kind of flip the coin and create a monster, a beast in the Avalanche that could have some staying power, winning the NHL's championship trophy, the Stanley Cup. So yeah, it's going to be fun to see how this plays out. I personally hope from a hockey viewer standpoint that we see 6 or 7 games from these two elite teams. And you're going to see, Nathan MacKinnon, Cale Makar, I think, do everything they possibly can to keep Colorado in this thing. Whether or not they get Nazem Kadri back, whether or not the Tampa Bay Lightning get Braden Point back. Point sounds a little bit more hopeful than Kadri, but both are definitely possible for this series. So it's going to be an awesome one to watch, and maybe the best Cup final we've seen in recent memory.
I have to completely agree with you there, and I do hope it goes deep, like you said. In your heart, Pete, who do you want to win this one?
So beginning of the preseason, my pick was actually Avalanche over Lightning. So I definitely appreciate the greatness of both of these teams. If that pick ends up being right, that would be awesome. My pick for NHL.com is Avalanche in 7 games. I do feel like if the Avs win this thing, it's going to take every bit of energy, every bit of resolve that they have in the system. So Tampa Bay, of course, so good following a loss. Colorado Avalanche are undefeated on the road this postseason. I highly doubt that holds true just because Tampa Bay is so good at home. Yeah. So I think Colorado, we're going to learn a lot about this group, whether or not they're with Darcy Kemper to start the series or at any point. Pavel Francouz has been a very viable backup this postseason. He's actually undefeated, so you can make the case that he may deserve to start game 1. But we'll see what Jared Bednar does, the Avalanche coach. But again, I think there are going to be a lot of ebbs and flows, a lot of opportunities for Colorado to make adjustments. We know that Tampa, time and time again, is so good at making those adjustments, and John Cooper. I think this is going to be a similar series for Colorado to last year when they couldn't make the adjustments, when they played the Vegas Golden Knights in the second round. They won games 1 and 2. They were leading in game 3, kind of fell apart in that game, ended up losing 4 straight and couldn't figure out the Golden Knights. The Golden Knights are a similar beast, or at least they were last year. They missed the playoffs this year, but still really a dynamic, resilient team. And that's the similar thing, almost to a different level with what they're working with facing up against Tampa Bay in this series.
Absolutely. Now, how phenomenal would it be for this to go 7 and Colorado to pull this off at home in front of that home crowd? It's going to be absolutely electric tonight. I'm sure it's going to be electric in both cities for every single game here, Pete.
Yeah, I think it will be. And we've seen some of the energy and adrenaline from some of those Colorado series through the first couple of rounds. I know that they've only lost 2 games in the whole Cup Cup playoffs, but I think back to game 5 against the Blues when they scored that amazing goal with Nathan MacKinnon going coast to coast, and then they ended up losing that game. That was a crazy wire-to-wire game. There was also game 1 against the Oilers, was that super high-scoring game where they ended up holding it off. What was it, like 8-7 or something, 7-6 or something? So there was that one. And then, I think the trend for the Avalanche is that they are comfortable and equipped to heavily outshoot their opponents, but that doesn't always translate to winning games, winning series, right? When you have a goalie of the caliber of Andrei Vasilevsky on the other side. So similar to how Shesterkin kind of neutralized the puck possession dominance for a while, at least, against the Lightning last round, now you're going to see kind of like different scenarios, different roles in that situation, because you're going to see Vasilevsky on the other side against an Avalanche team that I believe is plus 217 for the playoffs at large in shot attempts differential. Yeah. The only team better than that was the Calgary Flames, and we know they didn't take advantage of all those opportunities they had, whether it was the first round against Dallas or second round against Edmonton. But yeah, Colorado more times than not has the finishers, but will that hold true against Vasilevsky in Tampa? It's anybody's guess, but I have my doubts. Even though I'm picking Colorado, like I see the Lightning are big underdogs. That's a bit of an insult to them, in my opinion, because I think this is kind of one of those coin flip type series between two of the best teams in recent memory.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was shocked seeing the odds when those first came out here for this series for game one. Be interesting to see what happens tonight after the win, how these games adjust going deeper into the series. What do you think is the biggest strength and weakness for the Tampa Bay Lightning?
Well, they've played a ton of hockey. They didn't get as much rest as the Avalanche did heading into this series. And their depth is still very strong, don't get me wrong, but compared to previous years where they had, Blake Coleman, Yanni Gourde, Barclay Goodrow as bottom six players, is their depth a little less strong this year? Absolutely. I mean, they've still gotten big performances at different junctures in the playoffs from guys like Corey Perry, from Ross Colton, from Nick Paul. I mean, the list goes on. They're always getting these contributors. But that's kind of what I worry about with Tampa Bay. My thought all along this season, because I picked Tampa to go back to the final, is like, is this team still good enough if their big five is healthy to go on a deep run again for the third straight year? And my answer to that was yes. And it's crazy because you look back at it now and they didn't even have the big five healthy. Braden Point has missed 9 or 10 games now. Yep. And I think they're 9-2 without Braden Point in the playoffs, which is just incredible because so many other teams out there, if they have a significant injury, they fall apart. But again, this team is one of the good things about the Tampa Bay Lightning beyond Andrei Vasilevsky is their resolve. They find new challenges. They fell behind 0-2 to the Rangers. It didn't matter. That team was unfazed. So that's the good things about Tampa Bay.
Absolutely.
The bad things are all the hockey they've played over the past 3 years and the lesser depth than the previous years. Will that eventually catch up to them? It certainly could against a team of Colorado's caliber.
Yeah, they definitely have been finding a way to get things done, Pete, here. What are your thoughts on Braden Point? Do you think we're going to see him back tonight or for this series overall?
I mean, it sounds like he's been taking full rushes and they're trying not to get ahead of themselves, but all the indications are that he might be ready for game one. So again, that's not certain. Definitely keep an eye on it for puck drop, whether you're wagering or if you're playing DFS or anything like that, or fantasy pool. You got to keep an eye on it up until puck drop because it's uncertain still, even though it seems to be trending in the right direction. But Braden Point, past 3 playoffs combined, even with the time he's missed, he's the leading goal scorer in the NHL for a reason. He's such a dynamic talent and a closer. Really, some of the biggest goals that Tampa Bay has scored, whether it's overtime goals or that 1 year 5 overtime goal or, series clinching goals or clutch goals to kind of rip the opponent's heart out. That's what Braden Point does. So it is amazing that they were able to beat the Rangers and win 4 straight against them without him playing at all in the series. That, to me, especially if they get him back, that's the reason why when I look at them as being big underdogs in the series, I just don't quite understand it. I think that they have just as good of a chance to win as Colorado. It's a very evenly matched series. Yeah. And that could tilt it a little bit too. If Kadri doesn't come back till later in the series from his injury and maybe Point comes back for game 1 or 2, I feel like the things would shift a little bit for me, closer at least into the favor of Tampa Bay.
Absolutely. I think there will definitely be a shift on the books as well if we see that play out. Now, looking at Colorado, we have a fantastic team, so highly driven offensively. What do you think their biggest weakness is? We keep hearing it's Kemper or Francouz. The goaltending is their weakness. Do you believe this? And if not, what do you think their greatest weakness is and their greatest strength?
I do like their goaltending in general, and it's funny, it seems like ancient history now, but in the regular season, Darcy Kemper was better than Andrei Vasilevsky. Of course, the playoffs are a different wavelength and everything like that, where Vasilevsky always picks up his game. But Kemper is a high-quality goalie. If he is 100% like they say he is, heading into the Cup final, I think he could go toe-to-toe with Vasilevsky, at least in some of the games. And remember, they only have to win 4 out of the 7. It's not like they have to, he wouldn't have to necessarily outperform Vasilevsky for the entire series. He just needs to keep them in games. And like I said earlier, if they have to turn to Francouz, he had a shutout in Game 2 against the Oilers. He won series clinchers for them against Nashville when Kemper went down with the injury in the first round. And then again, to help them sweep Edmonton, it was Pavel Francouz because Kemper was injured. So again, I think they're in good hands with that. That's probably their only weakness, like you said, because they're just so stacked from top to bottom. Of course, should mention that Sam Girard is out for the entire series. He got injured in one of the earlier rounds. I think it was the Blues round in the second round, and he's not coming back. He's been ruled out. So I think a big X factor for me in the series, and you could call him a sleeper too, but Bowen Byram on the second pair for the Avalanche. This is, a top 5 pick from a couple of years ago that's had an injury history, didn't play in the playoffs last year as a rookie. They held him out even though he was healthy. Maybe he wasn't ready, but he sure looks ready this postseason because he's one of the top puck possession players in the entire league in terms of individual shot attempts differential. He's been chipping in assists. He plays with Eric Johnson, and Eric Johnson is like one of those key veterans for the Avs. So when you look at Tampa Bay's balanced attack, strong second line, if, of course, Braden Point comes back, to me, like, it's not just Cale Makar and Devon Taves shutting down their top line with Kucherov. A lot of the onus is also going to fall on Byram and Eric Johnson, EJ, as I like to call him, facing off against whatever it is, the Stamkos line or the point line, however they're clicking on all cylinders right now. So it's going to take more than just one good defense pair. So again, the Byram, Johnson, and Johnson missed the whole playoffs last year because of injury too. So that was one of the wrinkles all year. I was saying, if they, with a slight upgrade in Kemper over Philip Grubauer, plus a healthy Eric Johnson, a healthy Bowen Byram, the Avs really could get over the hump this year. So that's my X factor. And it's kind of a weak point without Sam Girard there, where I feel like those guys are going to have to step up and prove themselves if Colorado's going to win the Cup.
Absolutely. It's going to be a fantastic run for this Cup here, Pete. I can't wait. We look at this. Who in your heart is winning it, and who do you actually think is winning this?
Yeah, it's tough because on NHL Fantasy on Ice, we talk about some of the betting angles and things like that. And like I mentioned, I feel like Tampa Bay is going to be right in this series. If anything, you trust their pedigree and their track record more than the Avalanche based on everything you've seen, not only in this postseason. Like without Braden Point, they swept the Florida Panthers. The Florida Panthers were supposed to be here, right?
Yeah,
they were
exactly.
as stacked as a team ever could be, and they got swept. So
it was so surprising with them. I expected so much more out of them.
I know, me too. So again, Tampa is the team to beat out there. Colorado is equipped to do so. I think it's going to be a deep series. I think we're going to see the evolution of the Avalanche hold true, but that's not to say that a couple of bounces couldn't go their way. And then, of course you would lean on Vasilevsky from a betting standpoint compared to the combination of Francouz and Kemper for the Avs. That is a clear advantage. It's not a mismatch, but it's an advantage. Like Vasilevsky's the best goalie in the world. He just beat Igor Shesterkin. So he's still the best in the game. The Avs are going to have to
Different
do
level.
everything they can to crack that guy.
Yeah, he's completely at a different level here when you're talking goalies. And that's nothing against Kemper at all. Still a fantastic goalie. But Vasilevsky, like you said, he is just phenomenal. One of the best, if not one of the best in the world. So it's going to be a great series. We got a total of 6 tonight with how high-powered Colorado is offensively. But versus Vasilevsky, you got any thoughts on this total of 6?
Yeah, so when I did my bracket challenge, I mentioned I had Colorado over Tampa from the preseason, but then when you do your bracket challenge, it asks you for your goal totals for the Cup final series. So at the time, I was thinking maybe, the Avs could win it in 6, and I had the total at 35 goals in my pick over 6 games, which is about 5.8 per game. Again, my pick has adjusted a little bit because I have Avs in 7, so maybe just up that a little bit. Certain games, and maybe as the series goes on, it's going to be more, nip tuck, like tight checking, that type of trend as we get later and later. But early on, especially with the Avs having a lot of rest, game 1's going to be really unpredictable. We've seen a couple of times in recent years widely different results, right? Like, yep. When the Avs blew out Vegas in the first game of the second round last year, Vegas had no rest, and the Avs had a lot of rest because they swept the Blues. So that's one side of the equation. And then this year we saw, right, Tampa Bay swept Florida. They had a week plus off, and they played game 1 against the Rangers, and they got shelled. The Rangers scored 6 goals on Andrei Vasilevsky. So this rest versus rust debate, lingers on, and it's hard to pinpoint the actual trend about what goes on here. So I think like game 1, sit back as a viewer and see how things transpire. And then from there, you'll probably see some adjustments and the series will get a little bit lower scoring.
Yeah, I love the way you're looking at it for that. And that 5.8 works out completely on the average of the last 23 games these two teams have played to date. So nice. Great way to look at that, Pete. This is going to be fantastic. I hear you. Tonight's probably going to go over this total. It's going to be a phenomenal game. Where are you watching it?
I'll be watching it at home, so I'm excited about it. I'm not in Denver, but we'll be covering the series extensively. NHL.com/fantasy. We'll be dropping a new episode of NHL Fantasy on Ice after game 1, so bright and early tomorrow. And then, covering it the rest of the way. Then after that, we'll be getting into the NHL draft and free agency. We also just released an article, NHL.com/fantasy, on the coaching changes that have happened so far and the fantasy impact of that, looking ahead to next season. So you got Bruce Cassidy, who got fired by the Boston Bruins, was just hired last night by the Vegas Golden Knights. And then also the New York Islanders, who fired Barry Trotz a couple of weeks ago. They brought in his protege, Lane Lambert. So I think both of those teams have some bounce back appeal moving forward into next season, especially Vegas. Like Vegas with a new coach, and if their stars are healthy, Stone, Pacioretty, Eichel, Robin Leonard, I feel like Vegas could go from non-playoff team to one of the top 5 cup contenders for next year. So definitely keep it tuned, NHL.com/fantasy and NHL Fantasy on Ice, and we'll react to all the off-season moves and tell you what it means from a fantasy standpoint and also betting-wise for next season.
I'll absolutely be staying tuned, Pete. Can't wait to hear what you're coming out with for your content. Where can people find you yourself?
Yeah, NHL Jensen on Twitter and Instagram. You could also find NHL Fantasy and listen to all our podcast sound bites and see all the good stats we post. And all of our articles are posted on NHL Fantasy on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So it's synced up with the podcast. So definitely check us out on those platforms. Appreciate the followers and appreciate you having me on here. It's been fun talking hockey with you the past couple of weeks.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Pete. Thank you so much for your time today. You guys make sure you go give him a follow. Don't miss out on any of this fantastic content coming out. Pete, enjoy the game tonight and can't wait to have you on again.
Appreciate it. Looking forward to it. And it's going to be great to see that home ice atmosphere for the Avalanche and see if it translates, because it's kind of like I think the Lightning have passed every test in the Eastern Conference over the past 3 years, right? They beat the Islanders twice, they beat the Panthers twice, they beat the Bruins, the Hurricanes, all these great teams in the East. And now out West, it kind of felt like all along when they got to the finals, like last year was that wonky matchup where they played Montreal from within their own division. And then the previous year, they played that like wild card team in the Dallas Stars that surprised everybody, but they haven't had the chance to stack up against a team like Colorado or a team like Vegas, who we've been calling, the best teams out West for a few years now. Now we get the matchup we've been dreaming about for 3 years running. These are like the two best regular season teams in the NHL over the past 3 years. So now they're matching up. Should be great to watch, whether you're a casual fan or a diehard, because you've heard a lot about both teams, and now you're going to see them go head to head for the big prize.
Absolutely. This is going to be phenomenal. I'm going to be on the edge of my couch. Can't wait for this game to kick off. Counting down the hours. It almost feels like Christmas here, Pete, waiting for it to start. But thank you so much again for your time today. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you back here shortly.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Pete.